Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Sideline Eye podcast. You're very welcome to our preview show, and we're looking ahead to Saturday evening's intermediate championship semi-finals. First up, it's going to be St Paul's taking on Tullysarn, while later on in the evening, it's Shane O'Neill's and Cullaville. As always, this podcast is brought to you in association with McKeever Teamwear, proud suppliers of all Armagh GA merchandise. I'm delighted to be joined by Peter Nugent, and we're going to look ahead at both of these games, starting as usual with the one that's coming first. And it's St Paul's and Tullysarn. I think it's 5 o'clock on Athletic Ground Saturday evening. And of course, both these games are live on Armagh TV. Peter, this is a big game and probably a big chance for both teams to reach the final, arguably, and we'll talk about it later. Shane's and Cullaville are the two favourites. But Tullysarn and St Paul's a huge game, as semi-finals are. And it's a repeat of their 2020 semi-final meeting, which St Paul's won. So a huge opportunity for both clubs to get to a final.
Yeah, Sean, it certainly is. Two teams probably that have been knocking on the door this last sort of 2-3 years at an intermediate level. If we think back to 2020, Tullysarn we've been well talked up after beating Sarsfields to move through and get to a final at least. In St Paul's were there waiting on them in the long grass and tripped them up in the semi-final with a really good accomplished performance. St Paul's subsequently went on and were beat pretty comprehensively in the final by Flanagale, but it's hard to know really how much significance that semi-final 2 years ago will have on proceedings Saturday night. Both teams met each other this year in the league and won apiece. I was at the game up in Tullysarn, and I'd say in the night St Paul's are probably pretty stretched in terms of personnel. I think from what I can remember, they got a very few men sort of pulled up on the night, and they finished with a skeleton enough team out. And Tullysarn really only just done enough that night to get over them. So you would have to say that it's sort of a slight clash of styles. You'll have St Paul's, been around a few corners. There's a nice blend of sort of attractive football with St Paul's, but they can also mix it physically. And then you contrast that Tullysarn have that sort of more fluid maybe style. Big emphasis on their running game. And you'll have that sort of John Devine, Davy Hart influence on as well, bringing that sort of traditional Tyrone club style brand of football to the table as well. So it's a very difficult one to call. The form line for both teams have been roughly the same. St Paul's were in the shake up right to the end in the league, and they come up short. And to be fair to them, they've dusted themselves down well since missing out on promotion. I was impressed with them that night that they beat us. I thought they had to show a lot of resilience and they had to deal with multiple setbacks in the game, and they really came good in extra time. Showed a good depth of fitness. They showed a good depth of in-game management. They showed that they have a bench that can improve their team as the game progresses. Darren Fox and Aaron Rodgers in particular made big contributions that night. So I think St Paul's are in a good spot. I think they got through the first round playing poorly with a few players missing, and I think it probably served them well then going into the game against us. And I think the nature of the last win then will have them really primed now, because they'll feel like they've come through a couple of scrapes. And they're finding out a bit more about themselves all the time. So they have a lot of experience in the changing room, and they've no shortage of quality up front. Their attack's very strong for this level, spearheaded by Andrew Merlin, but he's getting a lot of help there. Owen McConville would be a really noted player at this level. Although he's probably, by his own standards, maybe had a quiet enough championship to date, but I would be expecting that you'll see a big performance from him on Saturday night. And then they've got other players supplementing that. Anton McParns, a really useful young player coming through for them. Owen McGill he's getting better all the time. Very, very leggy player, really pacey. can kick scores. Him and McParland both can kick scores. And Ryan Lawless at 11 is still doing the business. I think he got 3 points that night against us. And if he gets space at all, he can hurt you either by supplying passes inside or taking his own score. So Tullysorn have plenty to think about. There's plenty to think about what St. Paul's have, especially up front. But on the flip side of that, we look at what Tullysorn have, and they've got no shortage of ammunition themselves. As I said, they're really fluid playing style. You get a lot of running off the shoulder with Tullysorn. They'll go after you, they'll come after your kickouts. And crucially, Tullysorn, in my experience, they are very much a confidence team. And if they can get a good start in a game and go well on your kickouts, then they've got forwards that don't need any second invitation to come to the plate. So there's a lot to contemplate in this one, and it is going to be a very interesting game now to see how tactically it plays out.
And Peter, you did touch on both forward lines there, and like we'll have to talk about both forward lines. And just interesting to note, it's probably in personnel wise, the St. Paul's forward line probably have more firepower, while Tullysorn, I'm not going to say reliant, but they need Gavin Conlon and Eddie Mullen shooting well if they're going to have a chance. And it's interesting to note, St. Paul's have actually had 15 different scorers, the highest, personal tallies put up in the intermediate championship so far. So there's probably a threat for St. Paul's that they don't have that one forward that's going to kick 10 points a game. They have scoring threats from all over the place.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say, in my opinion, would be that Eddie Mullen would be the best out and out forward I've seen this level this season. And to be fair to him, he's been doing it now regularly for Tullysorn for a number of years, and he's probably only still sort of coming into his peak years even at this stage. So there's a lot ahead for him if he can stay injury free and keep contributing the way he is. His big thing, I think, is he's really taken on a leadership role for him. I noticed that this year in the games against us. In the first league game we played them, when things looked like they were going away from Tullysorn, he really stood up on top of the game with scruff and neck. And if things aren't going Tullysorn's way, he's capable of coming out the field, showing for kickouts, taking 1-2s, moving his team up the field, and still getting on the end of the score. So he is absolutely his value to Tullysorn's effort can't really be exaggerated enough. Obviously, Gavin Conlon would be more in the supply line, getting the ball forward, Eddie, but he's well capable of taking his own scores as well, and he's got a really good left foot. So how St. Paul's deal with that, I suppose, and who they get, in their matchups, I would say Decky McGee, who would be the nominal number 6 for St. Paul's, but they often like to get him involved and go man to man with the opposition's sort of key forward. So it'll be interesting to see. Although the last night they did rotate at times their defenders across our own forward line. So it'll be interesting to see what to go with. Ryan McCallie would probably maybe be tossed in the inside full back line, maybe going on Eddie, and Ryan's a lot of experience. He's been around a lot of corners, played football for St. Paul's for the last 15 years or so huge experience. And they've got Kieran Nash in there as well. So, but I think maybe Ryan might be slightly more suited. And then if Tullysorn go with a more target man like player inside, then Kieran Nash maybe you may drop in and pick him up then.
On that target man issue, Peter, against St. Paul's, you got 3 goals and all came from long balls into the square and they were hit to the net. So I'm sure, obviously, John Devine and Davy Hart have seen that. They've noted that, and that could be a tactic they're going to use. So that type of play wouldn't suit Eddie Mullen, but it's up to Tullysorn to find somebody that would suit that long direct ball into the St. Paul's full back line.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think Packy Comiskey would be an option that Tullysorn have used at full forward in the past, and he maybe fits that mode more. It's like anything. It's like any team, Sean. If you can get at a team's full back line early enough, and the quality of ball in is good enough, and it goes into those danger areas, and you're putting people under pressure, then on championship nights, things can happen. And you know, Tullysarn, I'm sure, will have their own means of going about this. I think Tullysarn are probably a more free point scoring team than what we would have been. We would be more along the lines of probably keeping it tighter at the back and getting a couple of goals and hitting 10 or 11 points to go with that. But if you look at Tullysarn, what they've been racking up this year, especially in the championship, they're more than capable of going hitting 18, 19, 20 points. So Tullysarn will have their own means, I suppose, of trying to break St. Paul's down. Interesting on St. Paul's was they were quite happy to get 15, 14 men behind the ball and leaving Andrew up front for long periods of the game, especially when they were in front. So it's probably somewhere Tullysarn look out on, or to look out for. Sometimes I think St. Paul's will get this name of being a very structured 6-2-6 type team. They'll keep their forwards half the field, but certainly on the evidence of the last game, we didn't see too much of that. So maybe a slight change in policy and a change of tact there on their part. But Tullysarn will have to be patient in them situations. They'll have to be patient, and if St. Paul's want to drop sort of maybe Dackie McGee back if he's not marking somewhere, if he drops into that pocket and to close off the space, Tullysarn will have to be patient. But if you're patient enough and there's enough movement coming off the ball and off the shoulder, and players inside can reset their runs, then eventually spaces do open up. So it'll be interesting to see how Tullysarn approach that.
And so I think you did mention it, Peter, that St. Paul's coming through your game, obviously drawn and having to do it through extra time and all, that they showed that resilience that they could get through a game like that. Tullysarn's probably something similar. They had to get through a really titanic tussle with Ballyke in what was possibly the game of the season so far this year. So both teams, it's probably an important way to come into a semi-final, that you're coming through that battle and you've proved now that you're battle hardened and you're ready to go again, basically.
Very much so. Very, very, very much so. I would say probably the nature of Tullysarn's win over Ballyke. If you're familiar with Ballyke's body of work this year, you'll know that they're always going to be in the fight, and they're going to push Tullysarn hard. And Tullysarn looked like they were coming through that game for long periods, and then it looked nearly at the end like they were going to be caught. So it's definitely allowed them to come into the game slightly under the radar. There certainly wouldn't be the same level of hype about them that there had been maybe in previous seasons, and that could well work to their advantage. I'd be slightly concerned with the volume of scores they conceded. And I know that they allowed Cross to build up a lead as well in the first round, and that would just be a slight concern. Haven't been up against them this year, that they give us a real good pacing in Tullysarn in the league, but on the night we felt that we probably left 3 or 4 goals behind, really good clear-cut opportunities. So I would just be slightly concerned for Tullysarn that maybe they're just not as tight at the back as they would like to be. And St. Paul's really aren't a team that you want to be offering a lot of chances up to, because their attack is very capable.
And Peter, we've sort of weighed this up. This is impossible to call nearly. It's a very tough game to call, but what way are you swinging here? How do you think this game's going to finish?
Probably depends on what time of the year you'd ask me this, Sean, but early in the year I would have probably have said Tullysarn would get through this, but I haven't seen St. Paul's in the flash, and just seen how they reacted with a lot of maturity in their performance to finish us off in extra time. They've Andrew Murren at full forward. I think crucially a lot of this will depend on his deployment. If he's kept closer to the Tullysarn goal for longer periods, that causes huge danger. I think at this stage he's at his best when he's been deployed close to goal. They might bring him out and he might take 1 or 2 kickouts, but he puts fear in people when he's in there. Because St. Paul's have 10, 12 years of building up play to suit him in there, so all their players are conditioned to to move that ball in early, move it in quick, move it in with height, move it in from the wings, put the proper flight of the ball in so he can attack it. And when it's hung up the right way, and when he's given an opportunity to come in and lead towards it, it's very difficult to stop what's going to happen after that. So for me, that's going to be an important thing, is his deployment. And if they can get away without having to move him out the field too often, then he gives them that brilliant fulcrum up front where they can move off, and then then what he's good at then is he brings in other players into the game for easier scores in round of D, because they can bank on him locking it in, and then you can get bodies flying left and right off him, and that's when the easy 20-25 metre scores come. So I think basically St Paul's have enough options up front. They can share the load out, and if they can do a reasonable job at the back, and I think from what I've seen in how they shaped up against us, they're taking a more pragmatic approach now, I think, at times, and getting men behind the ball when they need to. So I think, all things considered, they've been around the block and they know how to win semi-finals. So I think St Paul's, but not by much. It should be a good game.
Yeah, I'm the same. I'm going for St Paul's. I think that bit of star quality that Andrew Murnin brings was enough to get them past the Tones in the quarterfinal. I think it might just be enough. But again, I'm like yourself. I'm not overly confident about it, but I think if I'm going to tip somebody, I'm going to tip St Paul's for the first semi-final. And then with the second one coming up, and it's as tight, if not tighter, to call. It's Shane O'Neill's against Cullaville. Two league champions, Division 2A against Division 2B league champions. And Peter, probably from the offset, these have been the two teams we've been talking about that has the most potential to win the championship, and they've probably been the two favourites heading certainly after the quarterfinals.
Yeah. Shane O'Neill's Division 2A champions, as you alluded to, Sean, probably been a while in the making. That this one really for Shane's. It's hard to know how they'll deal with the pressure of knowing that whatever happens, they won't be in this grade next year to get a crack at this intermediate championship. Because if we look through it, without stating the obvious, they've been skirting around winning the intermediate championship now for a while, and it probably goes as far back as maybe 2018, whenever St Peter's came through against them in a semi-final by a point. Then Grange get over them in that final, and then 2020 Clans, I think, get over them by a point. And last year it was Cullaville.
Yeah.
They put them out in the quarterfinal. So they've always been in the conversation, very much so in a top 2, top 3 perspective. I think in other years they struggled in their league form because they were missing their county players. But this year I think you've seen probably the evolution going on in their team, where they were still able to put a strong league campaign together for 3/4 of the campaign. They were still top, I think, whenever the players came back from Armagh, and then they were able to see the job out. So, you throw in, we're talking about players here now that are recognised throughout Ireland, Greg McCabe and Kieran Mackin, who've had really big years. Greg's Armagh's number 6, and Kieran Mackin, all things being equal, would have been the midfielder all summer, really, Armagh's main midfielder all summer. So you're talking about players there with huge capacity to influence games at this level. And they've found Rory O'Brien as well. Maybe found is not the right word. I'm sure they were well aware of him long before he came into the consciousness of the rest of us. But he seems to be that sort of out-and-out finisher that Paul O'Rourke obviously was doing a great job stepping into the breach there, but Paul's probably coming towards the end of his career, and they probably needed some fresh blood to step in and take him forward. So he looks like he's really stepping into that breach now, and he's going to be the finisher that maybe just Shane O'Neill's were potentially lacking. They've got the best way to talk about Shane O'Neill's, I think, from my point of view, would say that they don't have too many discernible weak links in their best 15. In their best 15 at this level, you could definitely make an argument for saying that they're the most rounded team. I think potentially they have got slight concerns with their restarts. I think a way to go about them is to really get high on them. The keeper, McKeown likes to go with sort of dinky kicks. He's a big advocate of going short. I'm not sure that there's an unbelievably strong long game there. So if you get up high on them and ask questions, you can get results off that. But all in all, I think they have enough depth of Eamon McCabe, who comes forward from the back, is a real tour de force whenever he gets on his game. He's capable of kicking 3-4 points. Fitzy's still going strong at midfield for them. You've David McCabe in the half forward line. You've Mark McCabe, who's been really strong for them this year, playing a full forward. And then of course you throw in Conor Magan as well, who's made it back into the team now after being away in America. Like, so they've probably got Shane O'Neill's probably hold the aces. They've been sort of unconvincing, if that's the best way to put it, in that result against St. Peters.
Yeah,
Peters probably didn't bring enough on the day, and it always felt like it was a 4 or 5 point cushion that Shane O'Neill's weren't really going to relinquish through the second half, but still had to get the job done, and they did that. And probably the nature of that has kept the hype down off them as well. With Collaville have absolutely coasted it all year. They're coming off the back of a really good championship run last year, where they took out big team after big team, and that, I've no doubt that put a huge amount of confidence in their group. They were able to bring in a number of younger players, Dara Quinn and Ferry Kieran, to the note, that have come into the team and definitely added quality, give them a better range of score takers, and you add that to the calibre of footballer they already had, contributing higher up the field, and it's made for a pretty potent mix. They've a good solid midfield, Pern, athletic, strong, no nonsense really, and that gives them a good platform. And they've still got Fergal Rowan playing as well, who's got a wealth of experience in that anchor position. So Colville look to be in rude health, and it's not often you see championship results where scoring 6 or 7 goals in a championship match. It doesn't really happen that often, but I liked that when I seen that score. I liked that. I thought, yeah, that's a team that isn't messing around. Like, there's goals there to be had. They're going to have them, and they're going to express themselves. So it's an extremely difficult game to call. It's an extremely difficult game to call. My only concern, Collaville, is, and this is not to be disrespectful, but you would feel that that's potentially the weakest 2B there's been in quite a while. And you're playing 16 games, but you have to look at it objectively and think outside of Balik and Portadown. Where was the next bunch of challenging games coming from? And I think that whilst it's great for building confidence and winning games week to week, Shane O'Neill's are coming in from a totally different backdrop. They had numerous games that went to the wire, where they were behind, where they came back and won, where they've developed their squad and their team at a higher level. And even in their championship run, that game against St. Peters, that's going to give them an extra layer of confidence, because before the game, people were talking about St. Peters could possibly win it, and that this was going to be the game of the championship, etc. So Shane's have won 2A. That puts them at the top of the pile out of all 16 teams in the competition, and they won it with a wee bit in hand, if we're being honest. So rightly they're favourites, in my opinion. And I just go back to it. I just think they've had the exposure playing at a higher level all year. Collaville have had a lot of workouts where it would have been pretty facile, and I think somewhere along the line that could potentially catch up.
It is a worry that the first round and quarterfinal wins for Collaville, like the old saying, you can only beat what's in front of you, and Collaville, as you say, they went out and did that 6-18 in the quarterfinal against College Land, but College Land's going to be a junior team next year, if you know what I mean. So like, they're probably coming in just untested and not really sure where they are. Full of confidence, yes, but maybe just not sure where they're really at.
Yeah, it's Look, last year I can remember last year probably every time they were drawn out, they had to play someone thinking, well, that team will knock Colleville out, and they didn't. Colleville just kept growing, kept getting stronger. And probably in hindsight, you're looking at it and you're looking at how they performed in the championship final, and you know they probably didn't turn up to a degree on the day. If you consider their other results and then how they played on that day, they probably didn't turn up on the day. I think maybe Hotspur got sent off near the end and things like that, and Cruppen done a great job on Niall Rowland on the day, and they really kept him quiet. That takes a lot of energy, takes a lot of work to keep a player that quality quiet for a full 70 odd minutes. So some of the matchups here will be extremely interesting. You know, what will Sheehan's do with Niall Rowland? How do they go about trying to nullify Ryan Garvey at the other end of the field? He's got a really hot hand right now. He's kicking everything, frees from play, great handling. He seems to be playing with a bit more maturity now, not getting maybe dragged in as much off the ball, etc. And Colin Waters as well, who's going to tag him inside. If there's anything I would say, I think potentially that could be a slight area of concern for Shane O'Neill's is, do they have the outright quality in their full back line to go toe-to-toe with some of these Colleville forwards? I'm sure Paddy Gregory will be given that a lot of consideration. You may see Greg McCabe maybe deployed in a man-to-man role there somewhere along the line, but it's going to be unfortunate. Both these teams would feel that they would be capable of getting to a final, and you wouldn't rule out that this one mightn't go the full distance because they're two stubborn teams. But at the minute, I'm just thinking potentially Shane O'Neill's the higher level, the three county players coming in with huge experience and exposure at the top level of the game, and you sort of feel that for Shane O'Neill's now, it has to be now or never to win an intermediate championship for this group of players. Simply, you just feel that this has to be their time. They'll never get a better opportunity coming in as league champions with that amount of confidence and form behind them. This has to be their time to go on ahead, at least make it to a final and ask the question again.
I think just on matchups, I think it is like Greg McCabe. He went in on Niall McConville against St. Peter's, so that was maybe an indication that if the opposition have a deadly forward like that, he's going to be the one to pick him up. So I would imagine he's going in on Colin Waters with possibly Conor Mackin coming to centre half back to go on Ryan Garvey. But I remember last year, I think Ryan Garvey was shooting the lights out and Conor Mackin eventually moved back on him, but it was nearly too late. Garvey was already in full swing and Mackin just didn't get to grips with him. But if he's on him from the start, it could be a different story this year. And that game last year, of course, Peter, first round of the championship, Colleville have been relegated. Shane's have been knocking on the door a couple of years. It was going to be an easy win for Shane's, and Colleville turned that on its head pretty impressively. Yeah. But that element of surprise gone. It's a completely different game now this year. You know, it's really a 50-50 toss-up. You know, Shane's were expected so much last year, and Colleville, it was a shot in the hand for them. But it's a much different feel this year.
No, it's absolutely, and you got to give credit to Colleville. Colleville have been building now this last couple of years. I think it's Kieran Hotzer is taking Colleville.
Yeah.
He's done a really good job because Colleville for a couple of years were sort of floating in between relegations from 1B, and then came down to 2A, and they were just sort of hanging around and, you know, flirting with relegation and not making an impact in the championship. But this last two seasons, you can see there's clearly been a tweak in the mindset in that group of players. They've brought in a couple of younger players that have clearly added more quality to the setup. But to get to the final last year, the route they went, and then to back it up this year with a nearly flawless league campaign, where you could see even at the back end of that league campaign when maybe Bleak and Portadown were dropping points, Colleville were just moving on, winning the next game. And that, for me, was a good sign in them. And this championship, they've just been flawless so far, absolutely steamrolling, you know, anything in front of them. But again, I can't just help but thinking that they've sort of, it's nearly been a raw deal on them because they just haven't been tested. And this will be a significant step up, I feel, on Saturday evening.
And how do you see it going, Peter? Is it too big of a step up for Cullerville, or how can the
It's not too big. It's not. It's definitely not beyond them. It's 100%. It's not beyond them. And they have got they have got the quality up front to put a score up. I just feel that Shane O'Neill's have a good bank of work behind them. I'm not just talking about this year. I'm just talking, over the last 3-4 seasons. In 2019, like arguably they were the better team on the day, and they just got sort of sucker punched at the end, and that must have been incredibly difficult to stomach for them. So you'd nearly think in a way that group of players will be driven by that, because there is ways to lose games, and that's a different level of losing, especially a county final. So I just think potentially on this one, and this is my only reason, well, there's twofold. As I mentioned, I don't think the season's been kind to Cullerville and preparing them for this game. And I think that Shane O'Neill's know that it has to be now or never. I'm going to bank on that to see them over the line.
I'll mix it up a wee bit. I'll go Cullerville here. I've said from the start, I think they have the best forward line in the intermediate division. Now the matchups are going to be absolutely crucial. If they can tie down Garvey and Waters, then that's going to be Derek Quinn really will have to step up. Tag O'Neill, Virgil Kieran, them younger boys are really going to have to step up. And to be fair, they've been doing that, but they haven't faced this level of opposition yet. But I think I'm just going to go Cullerville. I have a good feeling about them. I tipped them last year in the semi-final against Sarsfields, and it come up trumps. Yes. So I'll go again with that one. That's my claim to fame that I got that right.
Probably wasn't Sean, just that that both games are just hanging on a knife edge, really, and it's good to see it. It's good to see it because
it was probably a perfect draw, Peter.
Yeah, 100%. Two really evenly matched teams, and even whoever comes through the final is not going to be by any stretch one-sided either. It's going to be again really evenly matched. Cullerville were playing in 2B, but they weren't the 2B team. They were comfortably probably a top 4, top 5 at the minimum 2A team. So really looking forward to the games this weekend.
And as I said, both are on Armagh TV. I think it's 5 and 7 on Saturday evening in the Athletic Grounds. Two hugely exciting games, and really looking forward to this. And of course, the hurling semi-finals are also on Sunday. They'll be live on Armagh TV as well. So we'll be back next week. We'll have our review show. We'll have our match reports, and of course, we'll have our previews and everything coming out over the next few days as well of all the games coming up this weekend. Peter, great to have you on. Thanks for joining us and giving us your thoughts on the intermediate semi-finals.
Thanks, Sean.